It is the last few hours of 2023. 2024 is arriving soon. Welcome to Plaganomica. Today I'm going to be telling you my opinion around how the housing market within the UK will play out going forwards into 2024. And it's not what you think it is. It's slightly different. Things will play out not as the media's portraying them. They'll play out based on the data, the facts, the figures, and in my opinion, the most important thing that comes into play essentially is the most basic tenet of economics: supply and demand. So sit tight and keep watching. So the major news outlets are all spouting stuff about house prices falling in 2023, and a lot of them are predicting that house prices will continue to fall in 2024. But why is this? Essentially, a lot of this comes down to interest rates and rental reforms that are affecting landlords, and further rental reforms are coming into play in 2024. The interest rate saga is simply the fact that interest rates are really high right now. A lot of people bought property during the COVID property boom, and those people are in a position where they will be having to remortgage soon, and essentially what's being predicted is those people will not be able to afford their monthly payments when they remortgage, and they're going to go under, and we're going to get their houses for cheap on auction. That's not going to happen. The stress tests done by banks since 2008 are very stringent. Most people who take out mortgages can afford them, and that doesn't mean they can afford them and it's going to be pretty. Then they're probably have to get rid of their financed Range Rover or their subscriptions to various things they don't need. Possibly even have some issues around selling furniture, not buying luxury goods, not going on holidays, but they will probably survive and make their mortgage payments. Most people do have a bit of leeway around that. In terms of the landlord situation, I think that has a bit more of an effect.
People should buy less Costa coffees and go on less holidays and not go out for dinner so often, and then they'll
cut costs, or get more money in, get a different job, improve your way of life. So they're the two things you've got to deal with. There's not much else you can do.
I got told off by my
There are people who are selling up their former buy-to-lets quite often on Zoopla and Rightmove these days. However, these properties aren't exceedingly desirable. Your average first-time buyer is not going to want a former buy-to-let because they might require some work to clean things, to sort things out, maybe realign some of the work that's been done, replastering, repainting, this, that and the other. And landlords are not going to turn around and fix their property up before they sell it. They just want to get rid of it. They've made enough money. They probably bought it for 20 grand. Now they're going to sell it for 200 grand. They couldn't care less. So yeah, I personally don't think that any of these factors will really impact house prices too much, because if they were going to, they would have already have done. House prices have dropped slightly, and beyond the nominal drop, they've dropped quite a lot based on the fact that inflation's gone through the roof and house prices have stayed stagnant. So essentially, that 200k house in 2021, that's still 200k now in 2023, has gone down about 10 to 15% in value just based on inflation. However, I don't believe that's a big deal, because essentially the way the banks look at it is still in positive equity, and I don't think there's many people out there who have become in negative equity because of this housing crisis. So why exactly am I bullish on the housing market? Simply put, supply and demand. There are not enough houses to sustain the current population of the United Kingdom, which is increasing. The rate at which houses are being built, this includes flats as well, by the way, I'm just saying houses, but the rate at which property is being built will not suffice the actual increases in population. This is taking into account birth rates, immigration, etc., etc. And a lot of the immigration going forward will be relatively high skilled, so these people will be able to come in and buy property and rent property and really compete with the native population for housing. There is currently no council housing in place in the UK effectively. Unless you're in a relatively rural area in any of the big cities, unless you are severely in need, you will not get a council house. It's not happening in London. It's not happening in Birmingham. And please don't come to me with those 1 or 2% of people who are massive outliers who manage to get a council house very quickly. They don't make the rules. They're simply the exception. So all this demand inevitably means that the houses that do exist, that do go on the market, will fetch higher prices because there's more people competing for the same houses. Now, personally, I bought my house quite recently in 2022. not actually this year, in 2023, but I put the offer in at the end of 2022. I didn't go through a bidding war because at the time there was a lot of uncertainty around house prices. But personally, in my gut, I felt like they would increase. So I bit the bullet and bought a house. I needed one anyway. Now, personally, going forwards, I think there will be a lot more of the bidding wars we saw in COVID going on and on. There's simply just not enough houses. And as soon as people get money, the first thing they want to buy is a property to live in. And even if the buy-to-let market does go down a notch, people are just going to try and buy their own first homes. Now, essentially, we're still in a position where people can afford a decent amount, and we're getting to the point where people are sometimes doubling up and tripling up to get mortgages. It will be very rare for a single person to be able to buy a house. Essentially, what happened in London, where house prices make up a constituent of two relatively high earners to buy a house, is going to happen everywhere. A place like Birmingham, house prices will average out at like 350k soon, simply because you're going to need two people on about 50k plus to come together to buy a house. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. There's another big reason here as well. It's around the interest rates, and specifically the base rate. The base rate has held for quite a while now, a couple of months. I believe the next time the base rate actually drops at all, it will release a massive reservoir of pent-up demand, a pent-up supply as well. Now, what do I mean by this? Pent-up demand from the fact that people are waiting for a sign that now is the time to buy a house. And there are also people who are waiting for a sign to sell a house. A lot of people are not selling unless they know the time is good to sell. They're not going to lose an extra 10, 15, 20, 30 grand. The only people selling right now are the people who have to sell. So if you get into a position where the media flips over and suggests that it's a great time to sell or buy, then essentially we're going to have a large influx of decent quality properties, which will also be mingled in with a large amount of people who are ready to buy those properties with savings, etc. And the combination of that will create a cocktail where there might be bidding wars, etc., pushing up house prices. And this will all be driven by a drop in base rates and a race to the bottom in terms of interest rates when it comes to lending. Buying a house at a 3% mortgage is a lot more easy than buying a house at a 5%, 6% mortgage, especially at the higher figures. We're talking above 200k, the numbers get pretty ridiculous for the monthly differences and how much you have to pay back based on interest rate changes. So essentially, that's my rundown of where I think house prices are going to go. I also think there will be a lot of regional variation. I think the fact that HS2 being postponed towards Manchester, or cancelled to put it correctly, will actually negatively impact Manchester house prices marginally, but it will. And vice versa for Birmingham. That essentially means Birmingham will be a stronger hub, I guess. Manchester losing out effectively means a win for Birmingham. Possibly, maybe. Maybe I'm looking at that wrong. But that London network, where London is going to be encroaching further and further out, might improve the house prices, spread those expensive house prices from the southeast further up towards the Midlands, which, to be honest, wouldn't be a surprise, because essentially the mega city structure is where the UK is going with London. London is too big right now to sustain itself. Spreading some of that load out rather than London getting to a population of 20 million, for example, might be a better choice. Beyond that, essentially, we have other issues such as immigration. And immigration, I don't believe it's going up, but high-skilled immigration definitely will, because of the way the visas are set up by the Conservatives right now. There's also other issues around a future election coming up in 2024. People will not want their house prices to drop before an election. So certain incentives for first-time buyers, etc., might be put in just before the election, or promised just after the election. And those might impact house prices just based on sentiment, even before any actual changes go into place. So yeah, that's basically where I think things are going to go. I don't expect to see a massive decrease in house prices for 2024. I believe there will probably be a nominal increase by the end of 2024, and the magnitude of that increase is highly dependent on the market and exactly what happens around politics, interest rates, and just public sentiment, which is a massive thing to consider, because public sentiment is what drives people's purchases, and essentially most purchases themselves are emotional. That was Plaganomica. Please subscribe. I'm going to bring out some more updates. I'll be posting a video on what I think is going to happen with car prices and why I think that's going to happen. And yeah, have a great day. Enjoy 2024. Happy New Year.